Hello, today we're going to talk about concrete screeding, what the importance of concrete screeding is, and how we go ahead and go on with this process. So concrete screeding is the beginning process after you lay down the concrete to get this concrete to grade, whatever it is that you're pouring on driveways, sidewalks, bus pads, whatever requires the work that you're doing that day. It's going to be what dictates the top elevations to your final grade of pavement, of curbs, whatnot. So you're going to go ahead and establish an elevation from elevation according to what the plans tell you, the proposed elevations for the top pavement. You go ahead and establish your grades off of the levels and optical level that you're going to be setting. Once you get those grades down from one point to the other, you measure the straight edge that you'll be using so that you don't pass the 20-foot, 12-foot, 10-foot straight edges that you're using. And you're going to establish pins, top of pavement pins, that's going to be your guide to the screeding process. So once you establish the top of pavement pins, you're going to go ahead and identify them, float them out, and establish a wet grade with your screed. And then that's what you're going to be using as your guide to go ahead and screed to the top of pavement. As you can see behind me, we've already established the top of grade here, and my fellow companion here is going ahead and screeding right to the top of grade, not going any lower or any higher than the grade that they've established, as we have to respect that grade due to drainage and due to ADA compliance. So the movement, the hand movement that he's doing and pulling the concrete back is something that goes hand in hand with your footwork. So as you can see, he's pulling screed, always moving his way back, constantly moving his way back, communicating with the guy behind him on the come along, and communicating to the guy next to him on the screed, and working hand in hand with his partners. So he'll be communicating to the come along guy, telling them to go ahead and pull back, and moving his way out towards the finish line. So there is a certain method to concrete screeding, which requires a lot of coordination, mental coordination. So you will have to make sure that you're always checking the top of elevation. You have to make sure that you're coordinating with the guy behind you, which is on the come along, with the gentleman that's on the other side of the screed. And there's a movement on your feet, mind, and hand that you will always have to be repetitively moving your way back towards the finish line. As you can see, there is holes that you will be creating as you're walking back. So as you pull in your screed, as you're pulling it towards you, you need to be kicking back that concrete to fill in that void so that you can continue to move back towards the finish line. So there is the coordination on that gesture there. So you'll need to be filling in the holes, or else you're going to have a lot of potholes throughout that screeding process, and everything that you've done will have to be redone. So that is one thing, is that you want to eliminate the rework, eliminate the double work, because it will be exhausting for your team, for yourself, and you produce any quality work. So it's very important that you're filling in the holes as you're moving back. You're pulling your screed back, communicating with your guys, and then filling in the holes with your own feet. Or you can have the guys with the come-alongs come and push in the holes and get them all nice and cleaned up. So that is pretty much what we try to continue to work, and that's how we build up our great screedmen. So as long as you follow those gestures there and continue to work your way back, you're right on hand. Alrighty, we're going to elaborate a little bit on the bull floating process. So the bull float is what's going to level out the concrete, bring up the cream, and start getting things ready for you to start hand working all the concrete, putting your joiners, Fresnos, bull float, and everything else behind that. So when you put the bull float, there is either a bull float that is a quick connect, or the bull float that has a chain. Back here, you see that it has the attachment with the chain on it. The way that works, if you turn it to the right, it picks the bull float up, and then you're ready to push your bull float forward. If you turn the chain to the left, it picks the bull float back towards you, and you move the bull float back towards where you're started at. The trick to that bull float is that you don't want to keep the bull float too high off the ground. You want between a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch off as you're moving forward. So if you're 2 inches high, you're going to be creating divots. The lower that you can go, the cleaner product that you'll get and the smoother finish that you'll get. As you're moving forward, 3/4 of an inch up. As you're moving back, 3/4 of an inch up as well. The only reason you need to bring it up higher is if there's holes that you really need to press down and put a lot of pressure on. That bull float, unless it's a very hot day and concrete setup, if you ride it right behind the concrete screed, you shouldn't have any problem setting that concrete up and laying it down to bring that cream up with 3/4 of an inch up. And so the moving forward and the movement back is what's going to keep that concrete consistent, nice and flat. Okay, as we talked on the last video for the joiner, the importance of the joiner is so that the concrete can expand and contract. There has to be joints that are designed to the pavement, to the sidewalk, the driveways that you're pouring out. And what those are meant to be is so that the cracks can happen on the joints that you lay out if it's going to crack. So those joints are very important that you put those in per plans, spaced out evenly. And as you can see behind me, they've ran the joiner in there every 10 feet. We have 10-foot sidewalks, so we went 10 feet, snapped out a line. You get the joiner, and with that one, as you pick it up, move your way forward, you also want to keep that joiner within 3/4 of an inch, not too much, because you're going to start creating divots and areas for your concrete to pond and have reverse drainage. So when you run the joiner, you maintain 3/4 of an inch up towards the destination furthest away from you, and when you bring it back, you pick it up. This one behind me didn't have a chain, but there is some with chains, some that are just threaded. You just maintain that 3/4 of an inch back towards you and then leave it alone. Behind that will come in the Fresno to erase the marks on either side, which we'll explain here on the next one. So we're going to elaborate a little bit on the Fresno. The Fresno is a thinner sheet of metal. It's almost looks like the bull float, but this is what's going to get you closer to a finished product. One thing that you do want to run right behind the joiner is the Fresno right alongside the joint marks that the joiner will leave. That way you don't have to struggle with your concrete towards the end of the pour. You want to erase those marks immediately, and then you can start working your concrete in between intermediate areas so that you can give yourself more time, give yourself more cream to work, and give yourself a nice finished product. So that Fresno gets ran the first time as soon as you pour, and then one more time before you're ready to start doing a hard trowel, so you don't trowel as much, and then the Fresno's done. So we're going to talk a little bit about hand troweling. Your hand trowel is before, as you're pouring, is not meant to look pretty the first time. It's really just to level out the concrete so you can get all your concrete tools, such as a bull float, Fresno joiner ran behind that. So when you're running it for the first time, you want to run it just to get the top of grade. Run your edger for the first time. Don't expect it to look beautiful the first go around. Once you're ready to start setting up and doing the final trowel, that's when you want to spend time and making sure that you erase all the marks. So as you can see behind me, they're floating to the top of the form that's already set to grade. Want to make sure that you're right up to the top of it so that we don't exceed percentages. We don't have any drainage issues. So you put your hand float on top of the 2x4 about 2 or 3 inches, and the rest of the float over on the concrete side, so that you know that you're riding the top of the form as needed. Right after you hand float, in that increment of area that you're in now, at that point, you're going to run the edger as well before you move forward. So you run the hand float first. Right behind that, run the edger, and then you move forward. No need to do the float all the way down and then come back to do the edger, because it might be too late and it's already set up. So you want to try to be as efficient and proactive on the concrete as you're using the hand float and all the concrete tools. Hello. Today we're going to elaborate on the concrete process, on how we pour concrete from the beginning of the moment we get the truck to the end where the final brooming comes in. As you can see behind me, I got my co-workers in position ready to start pouring out the concrete truck. Very first thing we do is check the concrete ticket here, which, as you can see, my foreman back there is dealing with the concrete truck driver, checking to make sure that we have the right concrete slump class of concrete and the right location, destination, and assuring that the concrete left on time. So this is one of receipts that you'll be getting from the concrete trucks, and you just got to make sure that you check the truck and you have the right truck in here on time. As soon as you're sure that the truck is yours, it's the right truck, right mix, right time, you go ahead and check the slump on the truck. You want to make sure that you got the right slump for what the structure, sidewalk, curbs that you're pouring. Here we're pouring concrete sidewalks. We typically like to leave the slump. Around a 5-inch slump is what we typically pour out on a day like this. So as you can see behind me, we've poured out our concrete, got our concrete under control, already ran the Fresno, ran a couple of joints. As you see, when we go ahead and start pouring out, you have your utility laborers in place to go ahead and start spreading concrete to the top of forms, getting everything somewhat leveled so that we can come in with the 2 screed men on either side and start stretching the concrete out to the proper grade and percentage that the slope on the sidewalk is supposed to be. So as soon as we get a good area, at least 10, 12-foot area spread out, then right behind that we'll come in with the screed, do the concrete screeding. Once we get that concrete screeded out, as you can see in the video, you will be screeding out and then checking with the elevations with the smart level and the percentage on, and making sure that we have less than the 2% that it calls for here on the plans. Always check your plans, making sure that you have the right cross slope, cross slopes and longitudinal slopes. So after you get that concrete screeded, behind the concrete screeding, you'll have a gentleman come in with a bull float, and that bull float is a magnesium float. You typically 4 foot, and you put on an attachment with the poles to make sure that you have the right length. That bull float is going to help you level out the concrete to kind of get it spread out, get it evened out, so that you can go ahead and proceed with the next tools that come in after that, which is the Fresno. The Fresno is a thin sheet of 4 foot as well, that'll pull up the cream and give you more time, and that gives you closer to the final product that you're trying to get to. You run the Fresno in line with the joiner. The joiner is also the contraction joints that you put into the concrete to alleviate any cracks. It calls for, on the plans, it'll tell you what the lengths are supposed to be. Here we have 10-foot sidewalks, so we have 10-foot joints, and those are meant so the concrete could crack within those joints. You'll see that my fellow companion here will run the joiner after he marks it out. He'll run the concrete joiner, and the Fresno will work in line with them to erase the joint marks that are left behind with that joiner. So it's not so much work to do when the concrete starts to set up. After you got the concrete under control, you'll see that my guys are running the hand edgers. They're running hand edgers. You can do walk behind or you can do a hand edger, and that'll be edging on sides of expansion joints alongside the forms and making sure that your concrete is flush to the top of concrete, to the top of form, whatever it is that you're matching up to. And that's what's gonna get the concrete under control. Once the concrete's ready to start working and you get the concrete set up in point, typically what I do is put my finger in the concrete. If my finger goes in about 1/4 of an inch, then it's ready to start doing some hard troweling. That's typically the way you check and making sure that you're ready and not working it too wet and double working. Once you get the concrete set up, you start getting your hand float, your hand trowel, your hand edger, and you start working and doing a final hand trowel. As you'll see in the videos next, they'll be showing you how to use the magnesium float, wooden float, the trowel, and the edgers, and that gets you ready for final product for you to come in and put the broom, and following that with the curing compound.